Hello and welcome back to the Superhero Kill Count. I'm your host Miles, and today we have The Incredible Hulk, released in 2008, just over a month after Iron Man hit the big screen. This was of course still the very early days of the MCU as we know it today, and seeing the groundwork being laid for a massive crossover in future is extremely cool in hindsight. Audiences at the time didn't love Hulk as much as Iron Man, but it was still relatively well received and pushed the cinematic universe towards its goal one big green footstep at a time. But who cares what people thought of the film? I want to know how many people died. So let's get to the count and find out. The movie opens with a title sequence montage showing the accident that led to Bruce Banner becoming the Hulk, and him going on the run to keep himself and everyone around him safe. Shockingly, this is one of the only movies to do this in the entire MCU, which makes sense given it's the only one to be produced outside of the mega corporation that is Disney, as you might have guessed by the giant Universal title card at the beginning. This is also one of the few Marvel origin movies to not be an origin story for the titular character. Spider-Man would continue this many years later, and while I think it works better there, it's just fine for this movie. When you bear in mind Ang Lee's Hulk came out just 5 years earlier, audiences already knew how the puny scientist became the big green rage monster, so why go over it again so soon? After the montage ends, we're introduced to Bruce Banner, played here by Edward Norton, in his one and only MCU appearance. We learn he's gone nearly 6 months without hulking out, which he's achieved through a combination of martial arts, breathing exercises, and belly dancing, I guess? He's somewhere in Brazil, living with a good boy and working in a bottling plant doing odd jobs to stay off the radar. While doing one of these jobs, he cuts his finger, sending a drop of his blood flying into some of the bottles below. Knowing how toxic his incredibly radiated blood can be, he rushes to clean it, but somehow misses this huge drip on another bottle, which is then filled and shipped off to the US of A. On his way out of work, he spots a lady being harassed by a couple of older men and steps in to help her out, only slightly botching his catchphrase in the process. Oh, that's not right. Later, he receives a suspicious-looking package which turns out to be a flower he thinks might hold the secret to curing his nasty case of Hulkitis. He communicates with someone called Mr. Blue, who's helping him in his search for a cure, and sets to work extracting what he needs from the plant
with a box of scraps!
Man, if I had a quarter every time someone built something with a box of scraps in the MCU so far, I'd have 2 quarters, which isn't that many, but it's weird that it's happened in as many films. He goes to test the extract but is met with failure, and from the looks of things, it's not his first time. In his desperation, he sends a sample of his blood to Mr. Blue in the hopes he might finally get some progress, clearly worried about sending that toxic blood anywhere he can't keep an eye on it. Meanwhile, in the Pentagon, we see Thunderbolt Ross, played by the late, great William Hurt, receiving a report of gamma sickness, possibly related to the Bannerlord himself. We see Stan Lee drink the soda tainted with Banner's blood and... wait. Does Stan Lee die here? He takes a big swig and then drops it to the floor, and in cinema land that's pretty dead. But he appears in later movies and we're told that his appearances are all connected, so I'm going to leave him on the count. Mainly because I don't want to do that to him, but also for the other reasons. They use this soda incident to track Bruce to the factory in Brazil, and Ross dispatches a team. Leading them is Emil Blonsky, played by Tim Roth, who was born in Russia but made in the Royal Navy, and is also a Royal Marine with a legendary reputation. En route to Brazil, the team is briefed, and we find out that during Bruce's escape from Ross, he killed 2 scientists, a military officer, an Idaho state trooper, and possibly 2 Canadian hunters, but we see none of these people, so we can't put any of them on the count. Hey, them's the rules, people, don't hate me for following them. Knowing how much of a danger Bruce is in if he gets in a fight, Ross orders the team to tranquilize him on sight and bring him in before he can even make a move. Back in Brazil and unaware of all this, Bruce is woken from his nap by a message from Mr. Blue saying he has a cure for his condition, but he needs more data to make sure it's a safe process. Data Bruce says is locked away back in the USA. Trying to return to his nap, he's woken yet again by his good boy whining from the sound of Ross's team closing in on him. They breach his home and move in to find he's already left, even leaving behind his good boy to take a dart for him. He manages to evade them for all of 10 seconds before being spotted and gets into a foot chase through the narrow streets. The chase leads them onto rooftops through some clothes hung out to dry, leading to one of the soldiers taking a nasty jump off a rooftop, but it doesn't look lethal unless you get on his knees. All of this excitement starts to get to Bruce as he fights to lower his heart rate and narrowly avoids hulking out before continuing his escape, briefly coming face to face with Ross where the two exchange heated looks before getting back to it. He makes his way to a busier street where he runs directly into the guy that was harassing his lady friend earlier. What are the chances? He just about manages to avoid a fight and continues running into the bottling plant, now with the angry Brazilian men, officially listed in the cast as the tough guys, on his tail, as well as Ross's team, all the while fighting to keep his heart rate low. He eventually finds himself cornered by pretty much everyone, and with a single punch to the gut, his heart rate climbs past 200, and he starts to transform. The tough guy leader goes to kick him while he's down, but is thrown across the entire factory through 2 windows and into a steel wall before landing on a broken pile on the floor. Despite all of this, when Blonsky walks past him a few moments later, he's letting out some very weak but very alive pained groaning sounds, so we have to assume that he's still alive. The same can't be said for his yellow-shirted friend, however, who is grabbed and dissipates into the darkness with only a shoe to remember him by. After this, Ross's team go into full attack mode, firing every single trank they have on Hulk, but they don't even manage to break his skin, and only turns attention to him, which is not the best thing when they haven't got a single weapon that can take him out or even do any damage to him. He charges towards them, grabbing one soldier by the head, and Hulk, not being known for his gentle touch, almost certainly kills this guy. Blonsky sees him wrestling with two soldiers, and one of these is tossed at him like a ragdoll. And when he lands, he's not getting up. The team eventually corners him and tosses a flashbang, which does pretty much nothing but piss him off even more. Hulk says his first words in the MCU before pushing a giant tank into the three men on the ground, crushing them before they can get out of the way. Blonsky, now the last man standing, continues to pursue and shoot at the Hulk and manages to avoid the forklift being thrown at him as Hulk makes his escape, waking up naked in the jungles of Guatemala. He makes it to Chiapas, Mexico, where he begs to buy some stretchy new clothing and sleeps on the streets, somehow eventually making his way to Virginia. Meanwhile, Blonsky struggles to understand what happened, but doesn't want to give up on chasing Banner. Ross shares that Banner was working on recreating a super soldier program from World War II, under the belief it was for radiation resistance. He tests it on himself, and somehow this resulted in him becoming the Hulk, rather than just dying from all the radiation. Blonsky sees this power with jealousy, and is promised by Ross a more refined version of the Hulk if they can agree to continue working together. Back in Virginia, Bruce tracks down Betty Ross, played by Liv Tyler, a scientist whose picture he's been staring at for most of the movie. Say that last name. Do I know that from somewhere? Anyway, he sees her walking away holding hands with a man, so gets all sad, and goes to get some pizza to cheer himself up. Just kidding, this is old buddy Stan, who gives him a room to stay in and fills him in on what Betty's been up to. He also loans him a pizza delivery disguise that he uses to sneak past the university door guard to get some of that data we talked about earlier. This guy is played by Lou Ferrigno, who is a professional bodybuilder who competed against Arnold, won consecutive Miss Universe titles, oh yeah, and was also the classic 1977 Hulk and actually voices the Hulk in this movie. Once inside, he makes his way to the lab and successfully hacks into Betty's account, making sure that the resident computer nerd doesn't see what he's up to. Yes, the cast does call this guy the computer nerd, and also yes, that is Martin Starr, aka Spider-Man's teacher, and is confirmed to be the same person by the man himself, High Lord Kevin Feige. After hilariously navigating Norton security, you get it? Because the actor's name is Norton. Now that's comedy. He searches for any data about himself or the accident, but comes up completely empty. Let Mr. Blue know this, he heads back to pack up and go on the run, but just as he's heading out, Betty comes into the restaurant with her handhold man and spots him hiding away in the kitchen. She goes after him, but he just about manages to hide away from her and slips away into the storm, before she almost immediately catches up to him. I'm not really sure what the point of that was, but they're together now, so who really cares? Taking him back to her home, she shows him she kept some of the data from his accident and thinks they should just go to General Ross together, clearly not aware that he's been chasing Bruce down for years to try and weaponize his condition. Look, he's even got some of the original Rhinestone serum from World War II, and he's giving it to Blonsky to give him an edge. He gets some in his neck and then, oh my god, that's a big needle going into his back. I don't care how tasty those drugs are, don't put that thing anywhere near me. Wasting no time, they immediately somehow know exactly where Bruce is and move in for a full-scale attack with tanks, trucks, and the newly enhanced Blonsky. In a deleted scene, it's actually shown that Betty's boyfriend tipped them off. Not sure why they cut that, since it's kind of needed to know how they found him, but I digress. Bruce tells Betty to run away, but she keeps following the chase to the Resident Evil 4 castle, I think? I'm not sure what happened to the VFX from Iron Man to this, but it's a little rough to say the least. The team definitely did their best, and sometimes actually does look really great, but most of the time it does feel a little bit like they were limited by the technology of their time, and they tried to push the boundaries as much as possible, maybe a little too much. That being said, the stunt work on this movie is both extensive and seriously impressive, with a ton of practical work pretty much anywhere it was possible. There's a ton of behind the scenes that show the work that went into the action sequences to make the movie feel as grounded as possible. Some teams are criminally underrated at movie awards, folks, do not sleep on them. Betty steps in front of the APC shouting at the general to come out, and when that doesn't work, she tries out a different name. Dad! Oh yeah, that's where I know the name from. Bruce, knowing he's not getting out of this unhulked, swallows the USB stick, holding his data, and keeps running to buy a little more time, but eventually gets cornered on a glass bridge and gassed, which of course the big guy isn't too pleased about. Once he's fully green, Ross orders his troops to fire every single thing they have at him, resulting in a near-death experience for this 50 cal gunner. Good god, that looks like some serious whiplash. I'm kinda tempted to put this man's spine on the count. Of course, because he's the Hulk, nothing can even touch him, and he shrugs off pretty much every gun and grenade they throw at him as he charges forward, knocking cars to the side like they're toys. In all the chaos, we see 7 soldiers killed by Hulk in various methods, like being crushed in a car, by a car, and exploded by 2 cars. Blonsky is sent in to try and even the odds, and does some cool jumps, but achieves pretty much nothing other than not dying instantly. So, success, I think? Now he has Hulk's attention, he leads them to Ross's secret weapon, a pair of sonic cannons that bring Hulk to his knees. They're actually shown in the opening montage as being from Stark Industries. It doesn't look good for Hulk until he sees Betty and summons the strength to take out the cannons. Blonsky, for some unknown reason, moves in to taunt the Hulk and earns himself a stomp in the chest that sends him flying into a tree. Betty then moves in, taking a more diplomatic approach, but just as he makes contact, a gunship starts firing at them, causing Hulk to launch his metal shield, knocking it out of the sky, and engulfing the pair in flames. Despite it being a sunny day mere moments ago, God turns on the sprinklers, I guess, and Ross watches Hulk carry a motionless Betty away into the smoke. That night he takes her to a cave where she wakes up and they take shelter from the storm together. Meanwhile, Ross visits Blonsky in hospital where his bones, and I quote, look like crushed gravel, meaning it's likely he's not going to be moving for a very long time. And yet, the moment Ross leaves, he's making fists and opening one eye, so I wouldn't be so sure about that. Sure enough, one scene transition later, and he's healed like nothing ever happened, and Ross seemed mighty impressed. Maybe a little too impressed? Without skipping a beat, it's back to the spy needle for Blonsky for another hit of super serum to even the playing field a little bit more and give him half chance against the Hulk. Betty wakes up in the cave and Bruce is back to normal. They manage to get into a motel to recuperate, and of course, vomit his data back up. She also buys him a new heart rate watch and some pretty stylish trousers if you ask me.
What?
Purple is making a comeback, Bruce, don't be such a prude. After a quick haircut, they get up to some other heart-racing activity before Bruce stops them, saying he doesn't want to get too excited too fast. It's okay, Bruce, it's common. It happens to every guy, it's not a big deal. Also, hey, wasn't she dating that other guy? You know, him? Anyway, Bruce and Betty go off-grid, sending the data to Mr. Blue as they make their way to meet him. Of course, Ross is tracking all mentions of Mr. Blue, and since privacy doesn't exist, he sees this email and works out that Mr. Blue is Dr. Samuel Stearns, and it becomes a race to New York. En route, Bruce and Betty talk about what it's like for him to transform, and we get a feel for how horrific it is for Bruce to be completely out of control and how much he just wants to be free of his so-called power. As they get close to the city, they see a police roadblock, checking everyone entering, so they abandon the car and bribe a boat captain to get into the Big Apple. There, they decide to take a cab to avoid any unnecessary stress from going in the subway for Bruce, and somehow get Axel from Crazy Taxi as their driver. Just about managing to keep a lid on his heart rate, they get out and elect to walk the rest of the way. They meet up with Dr. Stearns and go through the risks of attempting to cure the Hulk condition, including, but not limited to, death for Bruce, or a major Hulk out, likely resulting in death for the others. With that in mind, they decide to just go on right ahead anyway. Back with Blonsky, he's recuperating after his latest procedure, and is looking a little bit intense, to say the least. Yeah, you might want to see a chiropractor for that one, buddy, that one looks pretty sore. Back with Bruce, they're getting ready to attempt the curing procedure, strapping him to a chair, and starting the process of dialysis. Kicking things off with a shock, Bruce begins transforming in possibly the most graphic scene in the entire movie. We see up close and personal Bruce's bones breaking and growing to their new positions and sizes as he grows to full Hulk size. At the peak of his transformation, Betty hops on top of him to hold him still and calm him down as Stern sends a cure into his veins, stopping the episode and seemingly curing the condition. While discussing the attempt, Stearns reveals he has a massive supply of replicated banner blood and wants to use it to cure diseases and much, much more. Bruce, knowing how dangerous this is in the wrong hands, tells him they need to destroy it. But just as they're arguing, Ross's team arrives, led by the newly, even more enhanced Blonsky, to get him back in custody. Blonsky is looking a little bit unhinged and knocks Bruce out with the help of a tranquilizer, finally putting him in Ross's custody. He knocks out the soldier interrogating Stearns and asks him to give him the Hulk powers, clearly going mad with the power he already has and seeking more. Stearns, being a reasonable man, is only too willing to help him out, even if it will make an abomination. As predicted, Blonsky turns into a monster and knocks the good doctor to the floor, where some of Bruce's blood drips into his head wound, causing his brain to grow in size. According to the lore, apparently this caused him to gain a massive boost to his intelligence stat at the cost of basically being a green megamind, that eventually gets subdued by Black Widow, but all we get in the movie is this crazy smile and he is never seen again. Blonsky then escapes, but not before throwing 2 soldiers out the window ahead of him to check if it's safe to jump. He rampages up Broadway, taking out another lady with a thrown car and 6 people with powerful swipes. After literally eating the RPG, he chases the military vehicle that fired it and eventually corners it before smashing it with a taxi, with the driver still inside, for 5 more kills in rapid succession. Seeing no other option, Bruce volunteers to drop down and try and aim the Hulk at Abomination, not even knowing if he still has the ability to transform, but also knowing that he has no other choice. He leaps from the helicopter and transforms successfully, landing with a splat. Damn, better luck next time, I guess. Just kidding, he's still got it, and pulls himself back up onto the street to challenge Abomination, one green man to another. We also see Abomination throw 3 people high into the air, as well as I think 7 bodies on the floor by Hulk, just before getting to our final showdown. The 2 big green CGI men duke it out with all the grace you'd expect from such a clash, featuring classic spots such as the police car boxing gloves from Hulk. We even get to hear who Abomination's favourite friend is. Not the best choice, to be honest. I think I prefer Chandler. Eventually, the two are hanging on the bottom of Ross's chopper, and everyone crashes, resulting in 4 more soldiers being killed, but of course, none of our named characters being harmed. After the crash, Hulk is a little bit dazed, but Abomination is still rearing for more and pins him against the wall as the crashed helicopter gets closer and closer to being engulfed in flames. Seeing Betty in danger gives Hulk a fresh burst of anger, which he uses to shove Abomination off of him and use a sonic clap to extinguish the fire before anyone else is hurt. Abomination doesn't stay down for long and prepares to take out the general, but in the nick of time, Hulk does what he does best and smashes, even throwing the catchphrase out there like a real hero.
Hulk! Smash!
He gives Abomination the beating of a lifetime and is about to finish him off when Betty tells him to stop and let him live. Hulk gets the pinfall and a 3 count and kicks the subdued Abomination to Ross's feet before sharing a moment with Betty and escaping to WrestleMania. Later in British Columbia, Bruce is in a log cabin, back to working on his breathing and heart rate control, seemingly being able to control his transformations completely at will. To close us out, Tony Stark meets with Ross, letting him know he's helping put a team together. I wonder who he's working on that with. That's all for the movie, but how many people had their lives smashed? And more importantly, who's doing the smashing? Let's find out and get to the final tally. You know what? It's my bad. So there's not really much point getting worked up about it. Let's just get to the tally. 41 people died in Hulk, with 24 male, 1 female, and 16 of an unknown gender, with a mostly blue tower with a pretty red peak. Stacking that up against Iron Man, that's just under half as many kills in the second installment of the MCU. Heading over to our leaderboard, Hulk was responsible for 13 of those kills and Abomination for 28, pushing Ironmonger further down the rankings with no one around to dethrone Iron Man just yet. The Platinum Punisher for the coolest kill has to go to the pentakill Abomination gets with the taxi driver and the military jeep. Crushing people with a car is one thing, but crushing them with a car with the drive still in it, now that is some next level psychotic creativity. The broken bone claws for the most boring kill can go to one of the background bodies when Hulk lands. They just appear between scenes, and we don't really have any way of knowing what happened to them. For all we know, they could be napping. And finally, the seal of worthiness for the most heroic moment is going to Hulk holding Betty in his arms to protect her from a massive explosion. For something as heavy-handed as the Hulk, it's seriously impressive he not only shielded her from the blast, but also didn't crush her with his insane strength. Next time we have Iron Man 2, so if you're wondering how many more the Man in Red will add to his total, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss it. That's all from me on today's kill count. Thank you very much for watching, I do hope you enjoyed. I'll see you in the next one, and have a super rest of your day.